The galaxy of Orion was filled with countless worlds. Among them, the Zarn Empire stood as the most feared. Its fleets were made of iron ships that glowed blue under the light of twin suns. Its soldiers were trained to obey without question. For hundreds of years, no one had dared to defy the rule of King Valak. He ruled with pride and believed that strength was the only truth of life. Weakness had no place in his empire. On the world of Zarn Prime in the grand city of Kalara, a training academy for royal guards stood tall. The academy was a place where the best of the best were made into protectors of the throne. Among the hundreds of trainees, there was one who stood out, not because she was stronger or faster, but because her mind worked differently. Her name was Rena. Rena was young with silver skin and bright amber eyes. She trained hard like everyone else. Her aim was true and her sword strikes were sharp. But unlike others, she questioned orders that made no sense. When told to destroy something harmless, she hesitated. When asked to fight an unarmed opponent, she refused. The instructor saw her as a troublemaker. The king saw her as a problem. During one of the training days, the trainees were ordered to face a captured rebel. The man was tied and beaten, already too weak to stand. The commander, a tall Zarn named Rorik, ordered one of the trainees to execute him as a lesson in loyalty. One by one, the trainees stepped back. None wanted to be the first to carry out the command. When Rorik pointed to Rena, she froze. "Do it," the commander said. His cold voice echoed through the hall. Rena looked at the rebel. His eyes were full of fear, but also pride. She lowered her weapon and shook her head. "He cannot fight back. There is no honor in this." The room went silent. Rorik's hand tightened on his blade. "The king's orders are above honor," he shouted. "You will obey." "I serve the Empire," Rena said firmly, "but I will not strike the helpless." Her words spread through the ranks like a spark through dry grass. Whispers followed. The other trainees exchanged uneasy looks. No one had ever spoken against an order. The commander's anger turned into rage. He struck Rena across the face with the handle of his sword and shouted for guards. "Take her away. Let the king decide what to do with her." That night, Rena was brought before King Valak in the throne chamber. The king sat on a raised platform surrounded by glowing banners. His eyes were dark and sharp. "You refused a direct order," he said. "You disobeyed your superior in front of others." "Why?" Rena knelt but did not bow her head. "I wish to serve with honor, my king. I cannot see victory in killing one who cannot fight." Valak's lips curved slightly, but there was no warmth in his smile. "You speak of honor, yet you question my command. You are not a warrior, Rena. You are a problem that poisons others with weakness." He waved his hand. "Send her to the outer mines of Varric. Let her learn obedience among the dust." And so, Rena was taken away from the shining cities of Zarn Prime to the dark, broken surface of Varric, a mining moon where exiles and prisoners worked until their strength faded. The mines were endless tunnels of stone. The air was heavy and every breath carried the taste of metal. The workers there were guarded by machines that never slept. Every day began with the same sound, the alarm that signaled the start of the shift. Every day ended with the same silence as tired workers collapsed in their shelters. Rena worked with quiet resolve. Her hands bled from the rough tools, and her body ached from the heat, but her spirit stayed strong. Even in that hopeless place, she helped others when they stumbled. She shared her water when others had none. Slowly, the workers began to trust her. They whispered her name with respect. One night, as she looked at the stars through a broken ceiling of rock, she wondered what life beyond the Empire might look like. She had heard stories of other species, humans, traders, explorers, but the Empire called them all weak and uncivilized. Still, she dreamed of freedom somewhere beyond the chains of Zarn rule. That dream came closer than she ever imagined. Far across the void, the human exploration ship Aurora was on a mission from the United Earth Fleet. Its goal was to chart unknown systems and establish peaceful contact with new civilizations. Captain Daniel led his crew with calm confidence. He was a man of reason, one who valued understanding over fear. When Aurora entered the Orion sector, the ship's sensors picked up strange energy bursts. The readings came from a region marked as restricted by Zarn beacons. Daniel decided to investigate, unaware of the danger that waited ahead. As the ship approached the moon of Varric, the crew saw flashes of blue light on their screens. Within moments, Zarn patrol ships appeared out of the shadows. They demanded that Aurora turn back immediately. Daniel tried to explain that they came in peace, but the Zarn patrols opened fire without warning. The human ship returned fire only to defend itself, but the Zarn weapons were too powerful. The Aurora's engines failed, and the ship began to fall toward the moon's surface. Daniel shouted for his crew to brace for impact as alarms filled the bridge. From the mines below, Rena saw a streak of fire cut across the sky. The ground trembled as the ship crashed beyond the rocky hills. Smoke and flame rose into the night. The guards sounded alarms, but Rena's heart raced with a strange pull. Something inside her told her to go there. When the guards ran toward the outer tunnels, Rena took her chance. She slipped through the shadows, avoiding the searchlights and drones. The air grew hotter as she moved closer to the crash. Broken metal lay scattered across the ground. Flames burned bright, lighting the wreck of an alien craft unlike anything she had seen before. Among the debris, she saw movement. A human in a dark suit was trapped under a metal beam. His face was pale and his breathing was weak. Without hesitation, Rena rushed to him. She used all her strength to lift the beam and pull him free. His eyes opened slightly, and he looked at her with confusion and fear. "It's all right," she said softly. Though she knew he could not understand her language, she dragged him away from the fire and covered him with her cloak. The guards were getting closer. She had only moments to decide. If she stayed, both of them would be caught. If she left him, he would die. Rena looked back at the human and felt something she had never felt before, a connection that crossed species and words. He was lost, hurt, and alone, just like she had been when the Empire cast her out. She made her choice. Rena carried him into the nearby tunnels that the guards rarely entered. These were the old mining paths, long abandoned and filled with dust. She hid the human in one of the deep chambers and started a small light using a broken power cell. When he finally opened his eyes again, he tried to speak. She could not understand his words, but his tone was calm. He looked around, confused but not afraid. Rena pointed to herself. "Rena," she said. Then she pointed at him, asking his name. He hesitated, then said, "Daniel." The word was strange, yet it stayed in her mind. Over the next few hours, Rena brought him water and bits of food she had hidden from her rations. She examined his wounds and tried to wrap them with clean cloth. He smiled weakly in thanks. Outside, the guards searched the crash site, but they never found the survivors. As the night deepened, Rena sat near Daniel and stared at the strange stars beyond the cave's opening. She wondered why fate had brought a human to her world. She had been cast out for questioning the Empire's cruelty, and now she had saved someone the Empire would surely call an enemy. In that quiet darkness, surrounded by broken stone and firelight, Rena made a silent promise to herself. She would protect this human no matter the cost. For the first time, she did not feel like a problem or a failure. She felt like someone with a purpose. And far above, in the halls of Zarn Prime, King Valak was already hearing reports of the fallen human ship and the missing exile from the mines. His anger grew as he realized the spark of rebellion might be rising in a place he thought broken. The story of Rena and the human named Daniel was only beginning, and neither of them yet knew how deeply their fates would change the stars themselves. The morning on the mining moon of Varric began with the usual thunder of engines and the echo of drills. Dust floated in the air like a silent fog. The workers moved in tired lines toward the tunnels, unaware that something had changed during the night. Rena was still hiding deep inside one of the old chambers with the human named Daniel. He slept beside the broken wall where she had placed him for safety. His face was pale, but his breathing had become steady. She had done her best to clean his wounds, though her supplies were little more than cloth and old water. As she watched him, she wondered where he came from and how far his people lived from this place. Rena had never seen a human before. His skin was lighter than hers, his hair dark and short. His uniform was made from strange material that shone faintly under the small light. A badge on his chest showed a blue circle with stars. She could not read the words, but she guessed it was a mark of his people. When Daniel opened his eyes, he looked around carefully. His hand reached for the small device on his wrist. It glowed faintly and made soft sounds as he touched it. The language that came from it was strange to Rena's ears. She did not understand it, but his tone was calm, not hostile. Rena pointed to herself. "Rena," she said again. Daniel looked at her, then nodded slowly. "Rena," he repeated, trying to say it correctly. He then pointed to himself. "Daniel," she smiled slightly. Even though their words were different, the meaning was clear. They were beginning to understand each other. Over the next few hours, Daniel used his device to scan the cave and record their surroundings. The small screen showed readings of air, minerals, and radiation. He spoke to himself softly as he worked, while Rena watched with curiosity. The technology amazed her. In the Zarn Empire, machines were tools of control, but this man used them to explore, to learn, and to survive. When Daniel noticed her interest, he pointed at the scanner and said, "Safe." Then he made a wide gesture around them. "Danger." He drew a small image in the dust, showing the ship's crash and the patrols searching. Even without words, Rena understood. The guards were looking for survivors, and they had to stay hidden. She nodded and drew her own sign in the dust, a map of the tunnels. She pointed to one long path leading upward. "Old road," she said. "No guards." Daniel looked at it and smiled. He touched his wrist device and turned it toward her. It displayed an image of the moon's surface showing red dots for movement. The guards were patrolling the area near the wreck. He traced his finger to a point that matched her tunnel path. "Good," he said. For the first time, Rena realized they could work together even without the same language. Outside the tunnels, the Zarn guards continued their search. Drones flew over the crash site, recording every broken piece of the human ship. One of the officers, a strict Zarn named Rorik, who had once trained Rena, was in charge. When he saw signs that someone had dragged a body from the wreck, he ordered his men to check the mines. By the second night, Rena knew they had little time. She gave Daniel a piece of bread from her ration and some water from her small supply. He tried to thank her, but his strength was still low. When he rested, she quietly went out to steal more food and supplies from the worker camp. The next day, when she returned, Daniel was awake and sitting up. He had used his device to create a small translation link. When he spoke, the device repeated his words in a rough version of the Zarn language. "Thank you for saving me," he said. The voice from the device was not perfect, but Rena understood enough. "You would have died," she replied. "The guards kill all strangers. The king allows no outsiders here." Daniel looked thoughtful. "Why do you help me? If they find you, they will punish you." Rena hesitated before answering. "I was already punished. The king sent me here because I refused to kill." Daniel listened carefully. "Then you are not like them," he said. "You are brave to stand against what is wrong." His words warmed her heart. In the mines, no one had ever called her brave. They had called her foolish or weak, but never brave. That night, they shared stories in broken phrases and gestures. Daniel told her about Earth, about blue oceans and green lands where people lived under open skies. Rena listened in silence, imagining a world where freedom was not a dream but real. She told him about Zarn Prime, a place of shining towers and strict laws, where every life served the king's will. As they talked, Daniel understood that Rena's people were trapped by fear. He saw strength in her voice, a fire that refused to die. Days passed and Daniel's wounds healed slowly. He managed to walk short distances, leaning on a metal rod as a cane. Together they explored deeper into the tunnels. They found old mining machines covered in dust and forgotten crates filled with ancient parts. Daniel repaired a few small power cells, creating light and warmth. Rena was amazed at how he worked with patience. To her, machines were things to obey, not to understand. But Daniel treated them like friends, taking them apart and learning their secrets. As they built small tools for survival, the bond between them grew stronger. Rena no longer saw him as a stranger. He had become someone she could trust. However, the Zarn guards were getting closer each day. Drones began scanning deeper areas of the mines. One morning, Rena heard the sound of engines above. She climbed up a slope to look and saw new ships landing near the crash site. The royal banner of King Valak shone on their sides. Rorik stood among them, shouting orders. His scanners were set to detect body heat. If they stayed, the guards would soon find them. Rena ran back to Daniel and explained with gestures and urgent words. "They come. We go now." Daniel packed what little they had. He checked his beacon device, which was meant to signal his ship. It still worked, but the signal was weak. "If I can reach high ground," he said through the translator, "my people will find me." Rena pointed to the old tunnels again. "Mountain pass," she said. "It goes to the surface. We can reach high ground there." They began their journey through the long path. The air grew colder as they climbed. The tunnel walls glowed faintly with mineral light. At times, Daniel stumbled, but Rena helped him without complaint. They shared small smiles whenever they overcame a hard step. Halfway through the path, they heard the echo of engines behind them. The guards had found the lower entrance. Rena pulled Daniel into a narrow side passage. They hid behind large rocks as the sound of heavy boots came closer. The patrol stopped near the tunnel mouth. Rorik's voice carried through the air. She was seen near this sector. Find her and the outsider. The king wants them alive. Rena gripped her weapon tightly. It was only a simple mining tool, but in her hands it felt like more. She waited until the guards passed, then led Daniel away in silence. After hours of walking, they reached a high cave that opened to the sky. The night above was full of stars. For the first time in years, Rena saw the open sky without bars or smoke. Daniel looked up too, his eyes filled with wonder and hope. He placed the beacon device on the ground and activated it. A faint blue light rose into the air, sending a signal toward the distant stars. If they hear this, he said, they will come. Rena stood beside him, watching the horizon. In the distance, fires still burned where the ship had fallen. The Empire's ships moved like black shadows across the sky. Your people will come, she said softly. Daniel nodded. And when they do, I will make sure they know about you. You saved my life, Rena. You are the reason I am still here. Rena turned her face away, hiding the small smile that came to her lips. I only did what was right, she said. The king calls it weakness, but I do not care anymore. They sat in silence for a while, the wind moving through the rocks. Above them, the beacon pulsed steadily, sending hope into the endless night. But far away in the city of Kalara, King Valak stood before a large screen showing the mining moon. He listened as Rorik reported the sighting of the human and the traitor. The king's eyes narrowed. Bring them to me, he said. If the human lives, I want to know what he saw. And the girl, she will learn what true obedience means. As the signal from the beacon reached the edge of space, a faint reply appeared on Daniel's device. His fleet had heard the call. Help was coming. But so was the wrath of the Zarn Empire. And as the stars above Varric burned brighter, Rena and Daniel's journey was only beginning. The fire that would change the galaxy had been lit, and neither of them could turn back now. The cold wind blew across the rocky surface of the mining moon. The air smelled of dust and smoke. The night sky was bright with stars and the faint light of the human beacon that flashed high above the cliffs. Rena and Daniel stood together, watching it pulse in the distance. Each flash was a promise that someone was coming, yet neither of them knew if rescue would arrive before the Zarn soldiers found them. Rena tightened the belt on her armor, which was made from old mining plates she had gathered along the way. She had turned scraps into protection. Daniel sat near a rock checking the beacon device again. Its signal was steady but weak. The screen showed a small line of numbers counting down. He told Rena that his people might take 2 or 3 days to reach them. They had to survive until then. In the tunnels behind them, the sound of engines and metal footsteps echoed again. Rena knew what it meant. The Zarn guards were still searching, and now they were getting closer. She walked to Daniel and helped him stand. We must move, she said. The translator on his wrist repeated her words in his own language. He nodded and gathered his bag. They began to climb toward the higher ridges where the air was thinner but safer. The path was steep and rough. Rena led the way, her steps quick and silent. Daniel followed slowly, using a metal rod for balance. Every few minutes she stopped to listen. The only sounds were the wind and the distant hum of engines far below. After hours of climbing, they reached a flat ridge overlooking the valley. From there, they could see the burning remains of the human ship. Zarn patrol lights moved through the wreck like fireflies. Daniel stared at the sight for a long time. His eyes filled with sadness. My crew, he whispered. The translator spoke his words in broken Zarn. Rena placed a hand on his shoulder. We cannot help them now, she said gently. But we can make sure they are not forgotten. They built a small fire behind a group of rocks and rested. Rena shared the last of the food she had stolen. Daniel pulled a small silver object from his pocket. It was a picture inside a tiny glass frame showing a group of humans smiling. He showed it to Rena and said, My friends. She looked at it with wonder. In her world, pictures were used only for records, never for memories. She saw warmth and care in those faces. It reminded her that there was still kindness in the universe. While they rested, Daniel repaired a small drone that had survived the crash. Its outer shell was cracked, but the core still worked. He fixed the wires and adjusted its tiny wings. When he released it, the drone hovered in the air and blinked with blue light. Rena smiled with surprise. Daniel explained that the drone could scan the area for danger. He pointed to the small screen on his device. It showed moving dots representing Zarn soldiers below them. Rena realized they now had a way to see the enemy before the enemy saw them. For the first time, she felt like they had a chance. The next morning, they began to move again. Rena guided Daniel through narrow canyons and broken caves. She knew the old rebel tunnels from stories told by the miners. Those passages had once been used by slaves who tried to escape long ago. Most had failed, but some had vanished into the mountains, leaving behind hidden paths. Inside the largest cave, they found marks on the walls written in the old Zarn language. The word said, "Freedom lives in the brave." Rena touched the carving with her hand. "My people once believed in this," she said. Daniel looked at the words and then at her. "You still do," he said through the translator. Their journey was hard. They crossed deep cracks, climbed high rocks, and avoided flying drones that searched the valleys. Every hour felt longer than the last. Yet something inside both of them grew stronger. Rena no longer felt like a broken soldier. She felt like someone fighting for something real. Daniel saw it in her eyes. The woman who had once been called a problem by her king now moved like a true leader. When night came again, they took shelter near a ridge that overlooked the mines below. From there, they could see the main base of the Zarn guards. Large machines moved in rows carrying metal and ore. Above the base, a tall tower sent signals to the capital. Daniel studied it carefully. "If we destroy that tower," he said, "they will lose communication. My fleet will reach us before they know where we are." Rena looked at the tower. It was surrounded by lights and guards. She knew it would not be easy. But she also knew it was their best chance. "Then we will go there," she said. Daniel used the drone to map the area. Together they planned their path. Rena would lead through the tunnels and Daniel would guide her using the drone's signal. The plan was risky, but both understood that courage was the only way forward. As they prepared, Rena found an old Zarn blade buried in the sand. It was rusted but sharp enough to fight. She cleaned it and tied it to her belt. Daniel watched her movements and said softly, "You are a warrior." Rena looked at him with surprise. "No," she said. "I am just trying to survive." Daniel shook his head. "You fight for others. That is what a warrior does." His words stayed in her mind as they began their descent toward the base. They moved quietly under the cover of darkness. The guards were busy repairing damaged patrol ships, unaware that two fugitives were watching from above. When they reached the lower gate, Rena took down one of the drones with a quick throw of a rock. The machine crashed silently. Daniel hacked into the gate's power line with his device and cut the alarms. Inside the base, rows of cargo containers stood stacked high. They moved between them, hiding in the shadows. Rena's sharp eyes guided the way, and Daniel's small light showed the weak spots in the security field. When they reached the tower, they saw a group of soldiers guarding the entrance. Rena whispered, "You stay here." She stepped forward quietly, blending into the darkness. With swift movements, she struck one guard with the back of her blade and pulled another away from the door. Within minutes, the path was clear. Daniel hurried inside and connected his device to the tower's main control panel. Sparks flew as he worked. "Almost there," he said through the translator. "Keep watch." Rena stood by the doorway, listening. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the alarm blared. She turned and saw Rorik approaching with a group of soldiers. His eyes locked on her. "I knew it was you," he said. "The king said you were weak. Yet here you are, helping the enemy." Rena raised her blade. "I am not your enemy, Rorik, but I will not let you hurt him." Rorik laughed. "You were never fit to be a guard. You should have stayed in the mines." The two charged at each other. Their blades clashed, sending sparks into the air. Rorik was stronger, but Rena was faster. She moved with purpose, blocking his strikes and countering with skill. Daniel continued to work on the tower system as their fight echoed through the chamber. Rena finally struck Rorik's weapon aside and placed her blade near his throat. "You can still stop this," she said. "Let your men go." Rorik glared at her but lowered his weapon slowly. "You will regret this," he said as she pushed him back. At that moment, Daniel finished the sequence. The tower lights went dark and a blue pulse shot into the sky. The signal from the Zarn base was gone. Rena and Daniel looked at each other, relief in their eyes. But the sound of more soldiers approaching reminded them that it was not over. They ran from the base, chased by blaster fire. Rena guided Daniel through narrow alleys and into the hidden tunnels. The explosion from the tower lit the sky behind them. When they reached the safety of the mountains again, they stopped to rest. Daniel's translator spoke softly. "We did it. They cannot call for help now." Rena looked at the burning base and nodded. "You did more than that. You showed me what hope feels like." Daniel smiled weakly. "You already had hope. You just needed to see it." As the wind blew across the mountains, Rena stood tall against the light of the burning tower. The girl who had once refused to kill a helpless man was now the spark of rebellion that could change her entire world. Far away in space, the human fleet received the beacon signal clearly. The message carried two names, Daniel and Rena. The humans set their course toward the mining moon, and on Zarn Prime, King Valak watched the tower's destruction on his screens. His eyes burned with anger. "She was a problem," he said coldly. "Now she is a threat." He turned to his generals. "Send every hunter we have. Bring her to me alive." Rena did not yet know it, but her name was already spreading through the colonies. To the Empire, she was a traitor. To the people, she was becoming something greater, a warrior who dared to stand against the king himself. The mountains of Varric were quiet now, but the tension in the air was heavy. Rena and Daniel had spent the day moving through hidden paths and narrow cliffs. They could see the lights of the Zarn base in the distance, now dark after the tower's destruction. But they knew soldiers would soon return in force. The mining moon had become a battlefield of strategy, patience, and courage. Rena led Daniel through a series of caves that twisted and turned like the veins of the moon itself. She had learned every path from the old miners and hidden records left behind by past rebels. The tunnels were rough, filled with rocks and debris, but they provided cover from patrols. Daniel followed closely, learning to trust her instincts completely. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked as he adjusted his pack. "High cliffs," Rena replied. "We can see everything from there. We will know if they come." As they climbed, Rena thought about the people she had left behind in the mines. The workers were tired and afraid, but many had witnessed her acts of courage. A spark had begun to glow in their hearts. Even though they had been broken by years of forced labor, some began to speak in whispers of freedom and hope. By mid-afternoon, they reached the ridge. From there, the view was clear. Below, the mining complexes stretched across the valleys. Workers moved like ants, unaware that the Empire's orders were now in chaos. Patrols were scattered, confused by the tower's destruction. Rena realized that if she acted wisely, she could give the workers a choice, a chance to rise without risking their lives immediately. Daniel, looking at the vast scene, whispered, "They will follow you if you lead them." Rena shook her head. "I am not a leader. I am only one person. If I fall, everything will end." Daniel smiled faintly. "A leader is not someone who is perfect. A leader is someone who acts when others are afraid. That is you, Rena." His words gave her strength. For the first time, she saw herself not as a problem, but as someone capable of change. Suddenly, a small patrol appeared on the ridge below. Rena motioned for Daniel to hide. They crouched behind rocks as the soldiers passed, their blasters scanning the cliffs. The patrol did not notice the hidden figures, but the danger reminded Rena that every decision mattered. Once the soldiers moved away, she led Daniel down a hidden path that brought them closer to the worker camps. Along the way, they encountered a few miners who were suspicious of strangers. Rena spoke carefully, using gestures and the few words she could teach Daniel. Slowly, they convinced the miners that they were not enemies. Among the miners was an older woman named Mara. Her hands were calloused from years of labor, but her eyes shone with intelligence. Mara listened to Rena's story and then looked around at the workers. "We have lived in fear for too long," she said. "Perhaps it is time we see if there is another way." Rena nodded. She did not give orders. She only spoke of choice, courage, and hope. Her presence inspired them. Daniel watched silently, amazed at her ability to move hearts without speaking the same language. Night fell, and the first signs of a small rebellion began. The workers gathered quietly, moving tools and supplies that could be used for defense. Rena showed them how to use simple machines from the abandoned tunnels to create barricades and alarms. Daniel worked beside her, teaching them how to use small energy devices to communicate across distances. Rena knew the Zarn soldiers would soon return. The destruction of the tower had bought them only hours, maybe a day. But those hours were enough for the workers to prepare. She felt a strange sense of pride as she watched them organize. Not because they had to, but because they believed in a new chance. The following morning, Rorik arrived with a larger force. The black ships of the Zarn Empire glided over the valleys, their engines loud and threatening. Soldiers poured into the camps, demanding the return of the traitor and the human. They searched through tents and tunnels, their eyes sharp and unyielding. Rena and Daniel observed from a high cliff. "We cannot fight them openly," she said. "We must make them believe the mines are empty." Daniel nodded. "Then we give them a shadow, something that seems stronger than it is." Rena turned to the miners and spoke with urgency. She divided them into small groups, teaching them to move silently, create decoys, and use the environment to their advantage. Rocks were arranged to look like soldiers. Torches were placed in patterns to confuse the patrols. Every worker became part of the plan. As the Zarn forces moved through the valleys, they encountered obstacles. Machines that once carried ore now blocked pathways. False signals made them think the humans and Rena had fled deeper into the mountains. Patrols were sent in circles, and frustration began to show in their movements. Rorik shouted orders, but the confusion grew. Soldiers who had always believed they could control everything were now unsure of what was real. Daniel's small devices sent false readings to their scanners, further delaying them. Rena stood on the cliff, watching. She was not afraid. Every heartbeat reminded her that courage was stronger than fear. The miners followed her lead, and the sense of unity that grew among them was powerful. Then from the high ridge, Rena spotted a small squad of elite soldiers approaching the tunnels. They were faster and more skilled than the regular guards. She knew that if they reached the miners, many would be captured or worse. "Daniel," she said, pointing to the approaching soldiers, "we must act now." Using her knowledge of the tunnels, Rena led Daniel and a group of miners to a hidden entrance above the squad. Rocks and debris blocked the passage from the outside. They waited quietly as the elite soldiers entered the wrong tunnel, only to find a dead end. Torches lit the area, but nothing moved. Frustration and fear filled the soldiers' faces. Rena and the miners moved quickly. Using ropes and simple tools, they created a small avalanche that forced the elite squad back. The soldiers retreated, surprised by the sudden obstacle. The miners watched in awe as Rena acted with precision and bravery. Daniel clapped his hands quietly. "You are truly a warrior," he said through the translator. Rena shook her head. "I only do what must be done," she replied. But inside she felt a new sense of confidence. She was no longer just a problem in the eyes of the Empire. She was a force that could protect others and perhaps even change the balance of power. Word of the rebellion spread quickly. Miners in nearby tunnels and camps began to move, inspired by Rena's courage. They used tools and simple machines to block patrols and communicate silently. Each small act of resistance made the Empire's soldiers more uncertain and fearful. By the end of the second day, the once silent mining moon was alive with whispers of defiance. The workers, led by Rena's example, were no longer slaves. They were fighters, each of them discovering courage they had never known. From the cliffs above, Daniel watched the transformation. He knew that this small group could not defeat the Empire completely, but they could survive, and more importantly, they could inspire hope. He looked at Rena, standing tall among the rocks. Her amber eyes glowed with determination. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a symbol. That night, as the wind swept through the mountains, Rena and Daniel sat together and watched the stars. The fires of rebellion burned below them, small yet powerful. The beacon they had sent into space was still active, sending a message to Daniel's fleet. Rescue was coming, but the challenge was far from over. Rena spoke softly. "The king will not let this continue. He will send more soldiers," Daniel nodded. "Then we prepare. Every person who follows you is part of the fight. We must protect them." Rena smiled faintly. "I never thought I would lead others. I only wanted to survive." Daniel took her hand gently. "Leadership finds those who are willing to act when others are afraid. That is who you are." In the distance, the first ships of the Zarn Empire began to regroup, unaware that their control over the mining moon was slipping. The rebellion, small yet fierce, had taken root. And Rena, once called a problem by her king, had become the heart of it. Above the mountains, the stars seemed brighter than ever. The galaxy watched silently as a new force emerged on Varric, a force that carried hope, courage, and the promise of freedom. The journey was far from over, but the warrior within Rena had awakened. She no longer ran from fear. She faced it, shaping her people into a resistance that could challenge the might of the Zarn Empire. And far above the horizon, Captain Daniel's fleet moved closer, ready to join the fight, bringing with them allies who would see Rena not as a problem, but as the warrior she had always been. The morning sun rose over the mountains of Varric, casting long shadows across the valleys. The air was crisp, and for the first time in days, Rena felt a calm moment, though the tension remained. Below them, the miners moved quietly, preparing for the inevitable return of the Zarn soldiers. They had learned to work together under Rena's guidance, setting up defenses and alarms, and organizing themselves in ways the Empire had never expected. Daniel stood beside Rena, scanning the horizon with his device. The faint signals from his fleet were getting stronger. "They will arrive soon," he said. "We must be ready to hold the line until they get here." Rena nodded. "We cannot let the Empire destroy the people who chose to fight with us. They have seen courage and they deserve freedom." From the distant valleys, the sound of engines grew louder. Zarn ships appeared on the horizon, black shapes cutting across the sky. Soldiers poured from the landing pads, moving quickly toward the camps. Rorik led them, his face set with determination. He was determined to capture Rena and the human before the rebellion could spread any further. Rena looked at the miners around her. "Stay calm," she said. "We fight only if we must, and we fight together." As the soldiers advanced, Rena and Daniel led a group of miners through hidden tunnels that opened to high cliffs overlooking the valley. From there, they had a clear view of the enemy forces. Rena's heart beat steadily. She had trained in the academy, fought patrols, and survived the mines. Now she would fight not for obedience but for freedom. Daniel looked at her. "You know this is dangerous. You could be captured." Rena's amber eyes shone with resolve. "I would rather die standing than live on my knees." The first clash came quickly. Zarn soldiers reached the mines only to find the tunnels blocked and alarms triggered. Miners threw stones and used simple machines to topple obstacles in their path. Confused by the resistance, the soldiers paused, giving Rena and Daniel the chance to strike from the cliffs above. Rena moved swiftly. She guided the miners in precise attacks, taking advantage of their knowledge of the tunnels and terrain. Daniel used his devices to jam communications and provide early warnings of patrols. Together, they were more than a team. They were a force that could surprise even the Empire. Rorik noticed the coordination and grew angry. "She is not just a miner," he shouted. "She leads them. Bring her to me alive." Rena heard his words and turned to Daniel. "We cannot let them capture anyone. We need to push them back and protect the people." The battle raged across the mountains. Small groups of miners held choke points, using rocks and simple tools to slow the soldiers. Rena's courage inspired them. Each miner who had been afraid days ago now fought with determination. They were no longer victims. They were warriors. Daniel worked with a group of miners to sabotage enemy equipment. They used small power cells to disable vehicles and block pathways. The Zarn soldiers were frustrated, realizing that the people they had thought were weak could resist. High above, Rena faced Rorik once more. His black armor gleamed under the sun and his eyes were sharp with anger. "You cannot win," he said. Rena held her blade firmly. "Winning is not about you or me. It is about freedom for those who deserve it." Their fight was fierce. Rorik struck hard, but Rena was faster, moving with precision and purpose. She blocked his blows, countered his strikes, and finally forced him to retreat. Her skill and bravery inspired the miners watching below. They saw that their leader could face the Empire's strongest and survive. As the battle continued, distant lights appeared in the sky. Daniel looked at his device and smiled. "The fleet is here!" he exclaimed. Ships from the human fleet appeared above Varric, their engines cutting through the sky. They unleashed targeted attacks on the Zarn ships and vehicles, giving the rebels the advantage. The miners cheered quietly, hiding behind rocks while Rena watched the sky. With the arrival of the humans, the tide of the battle changed. Zarn forces were forced to retreat under the coordinated attacks from the cliffs and the fleet. Soldiers who had been confident before were now scattered. and Rorik realized that the Empire had underestimated the strength of unity and courage. Rena did not pursue them immediately. She turned to the miners, helping them gather the injured and guiding them to safety. Daniel worked with her, setting up communication with his fleet to ensure that evacuation was smooth. They moved carefully, making sure that no one was left behind. When the battle ended, the valley was quiet except for the faint smoke of fires and the sound of distant engines. Miners gathered around Rena. Their faces were tired but full of hope. They had survived, and they had seen that courage could change the impossible. Daniel approached Rena. "You did this," he said. "You led them. You showed them what it means to fight for freedom." Rena looked at him and smiled faintly. "I only helped them see it. They already had the courage inside." The human fleet landed in the valley, assisting the miners and providing medical aid to the injured. Supplies were distributed, and messages were sent to distant colonies to warn of the Empire's reach. For the first time in many years, hope was alive on Varric. Far away in the capital of Zarn Prime, King Valak watched the events unfold through a communication screen. His black eyes burned with anger and disbelief. "She was a problem," he muttered. "Now she is a threat. Send every fleet we have. Bring her to me." Rena knew that the Empire would not give up easily. But for the first time, she felt that she had something stronger than fear. The courage of people who chose to stand beside her. As the sun set over the mountains, she stood at the cliff's edge looking at the valley below. The miners were free for now, and Daniel's fleet provided protection. Her heart was calm, but her mind was alert. The war was not over, but she had won a battle that mattered more than victory. It was a battle for choice, for hope, and for the future. Daniel stood beside her. "What now?" he asked. Rena looked at the horizon where the stars were beginning to shine. "We help them rebuild," she said. "We prepare for the future. And we remind the Empire that no one can take courage from a willing heart." The miners gathered around, and for the first time, they did not look like defeated laborers. They were strong, proud, and determined. They had seen the warrior within Rena, and it had awakened something inside them all. That night, as the stars glimmered above, Rena and Daniel spoke quietly about the future. They would face more challenges and the Empire would return, but they had something that could never be taken away: unity, courage, and hope. Rena had transformed from an exile, called a problem by her king, into a symbol of strength. The human who had once been a stranger saw the warrior within her, and together they had sparked a movement that could not be stopped. The next day, Rena addressed the miners and the survivors with calm determination. "You have a choice now," she said. "The Empire may return, but you are no longer powerless. You can defend yourselves, your homes, and your freedom. Courage is not given. It is found within you." The people cheered quietly. They had seen her fight and they had seen hope. Rena smiled, knowing that the spark of rebellion was now a flame that would spread beyond Varric. Daniel looked at the stars. "Your courage will be remembered," he said. Rena shook her head. "Not mine alone, ours. Everyone who chooses to fight for what is right. That is what matters." Above them, the human ships waited. Below, the miners began organizing their lives anew. The Empire would come again, but this day marked the beginning of something different. Rena, the girl once called a problem, had become a warrior. Daniel had seen it, and now the galaxy would know it too. The story of courage, hope, and unity would spread among the stars. As night fell and the first signals of distant worlds reached Varric, Rena stood tall, ready for whatever the future might bring. She had faced fear, defied the king, and inspired an entire people. And above all, she had discovered the power that lies within every willing heart. The stars watched silently, marking a new dawn in the galaxy, a dawn of courage, freedom, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dare to stand for what is right. Rena had begun a journey that would change not just her world, but the entire galaxy. And with Daniel by her side, she knew that no matter what came, the spark they had ignited could never be extinguished. The galaxy would remember her, not as a problem, but as a warrior.